You're tuned into the Writing Community Chat Show, the live streaming YouTube podcast that brings you the stories of authors, screenwriters, and more. Indie or established, this show's for the community, and we invite you to be a part of it. Head to thewritingcommunitychatshow.com for more info. The WCCS. Together as one, we get it done.
Hello and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. We've got a great guest for you tonight, someone who walks both sides of the publishing world as an author and as someone who works in the business and knows a lot about it. So you're in for a real treat. I am here without my co-host tonight because he is still in work. You know, we mentioned how we do our day jobs around this and have done for nearly 6 years. So yes, we put the graft in and we do the shows where we can. So I'm sure he will catch up on this as it's an interview he's looking forward to consuming, and I hope you are too. So I'm going to introduce our guest and get straight into it. So she is somebody who has released five times best-selling. I'll start that again. She is a 5-time best-selling author of psychological thrillers, including the smash hits The Wild Girls and her most recent page-turner, The Trip. By day, she's an award-winning executive publisher at a major UK house, responsible for acquiring and publishing commercial fiction for some of the biggest names in the genre. If that wasn't enough, she's also She's also dedicated to demystifying the industry through a highly popular Substack newsletter, The Honest Editor. She has an unparalleled 360-degree view on how to write a book, how to get it published, and how to turn it into a bestseller. And I can't wait to get stuck into it all. So please help me in giving a nice, big, warm welcome to the amazing Phoebe Morgan. Hello, Phoebe.
Oh, hi. Thanks for that nice introduction. That was very lovely.
You're welcome. It was great until I stumbled a couple of times. But yeah, thank you for joining us. I hope you're doing well.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I literally just knocked my speaker off.
Okay.
Hence the reason I was a little bit distracted. Yeah, you're welcome. I'm so glad to get you on the show. We love having people on hearing their stories. But as I mentioned, you've done it on both sides and you work on both sides. And it's great to have all those sorts of bits of advice that we can take from you and your sort of vision in the two different sides of the world. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Great. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about both sides. So whatever works for you.
Yeah. How's your week been, first of all? That's a question I normally start with. So how has it been for you?
So as I said to you before we started recording, it's just been very busy. I joined my new job, Simon Schuster, 1 month ago. So it's a brand new job for me. It's very exciting, but I'm still in that stage, you know, when you start a new job and you're just getting to know everybody, having lots and lots of meetings, meeting my team, meeting my authors. So it's been very invigorating. But it has just been quite busy. But other than that, it's great. I like getting stuck in, so I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, I can imagine stepping into something like that must be quite overwhelming, but also at the same time very exciting.
Yeah, exactly. I think it is. And you know, it's a really great list at Simon & Schuster, and it's a brilliant team. I think what it is my previous job was at Hodder, which was part of Hachette. So I finished that job on the Friday a month ago. Then I had one weekend. Then I started the new job on a Monday. And on the Tuesday, I went to Frankfurt, to the Frankfurt Book Fair for the rest of that week. So I was just, you know, I didn't have very much time to kind of settle in or relax in between jobs, which is fine. I don't really need that time, to be honest. It's fine. But it's just a change of pace. Because also when you're on your notice period, as you probably know, like same with any industry, you kind of slow down in the last 3 months, and then so it's like a real gear shift to then suddenly be like, oh, okay, now I need to really, really speed up.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, hopefully we can get a bit more on that in a little bit. But where are you from? Where are you joining us from?
I live in London. I live in South London near Brixton.
Okay. And the question I love to ask, and it's always interesting, the answer varies quite a lot. Generally, it's about how the author connection is where you are. So that's like people who might be reading your books, or you know, fellow co-workers as the industry you work in. But is there much of a connection there physically, or do you do most of your interactions online?
I try to do lots of things in person. I am not originally from here. I grew up in Suffolk, so I often try to go back and do bookshop talks in Suffolk, and I do some in London as well. I think in publishing, a lot of people in the industry live in London and around London. So there's people that live nearby. And equally, there's writers that live nearby. But I don't mind traveling. So, for example, the other weekend I went to the Stratford-on-Avon Literary Festival. So I did a whole day there, which was really great. And I have a few other things coming up. I like to try and meet other writers in person and meet readers in person where possible. But it's also good to have the online connections. And I think obviously we're a long way past the pandemic now, thank goodness. But especially during the pandemic, I just found it so great to be able to use. I guess at that point, Twitter was really in a better place than it is now. So I remember having like a lot of conversations with authors online then, and things like this were really helpful for aspiring writers and established writers and publishers to be able to connect online if for some reason you can't get out.
Yeah, it was during COVID that this show kind of emerged, and Twitter was a big reason for that. But it's definitely a different place now. But I read somewhere that you had raised a lot of money during COVID for charity and to do with books.
Yeah, I did. I forgot actually. I did this thing called Books for Vaccines, which was essentially, I just set it up as an auction. It was inspired by somebody did one for Grenfell when the Grenfell Tower disaster happened, and it was like an online auction. So I asked people in the publishing industry to donate items or their time. So it was like sets of signed books, or it was like one-to-ones with publishers or agents. And I ended up having some crazily good stuff. Like I had, signed stuff from J.K. Rowling, Hilary Mantel, all the kind of big publishers and agents gave their time, and we raised £60,000 for a charity that was providing the COVID vaccine to underdeveloped countries at that point. They were called Care International, the charity, and I worked with their team. I did it all by myself really, but then the team, they were really happy and they were very supportive still, and I sometimes still say hello to them. Everyone from the industry was really helpful. I think it was at the time where we had the vaccine. And I was also really, really anxious in the pandemic. I hated it. I was just really, really stressed out, not necessarily about getting ill, but about the world never being the same again. I got very, very in my head about it. And so when we in the UK had access to the vaccine, I just hated the idea that not everybody did. So obviously it was only a drop in the ocean, really, but it was nice to try and do something to give back. And I think the publishing industry can be really good at that. Like when people rally around, they can make a bit of a difference. So that was really nice.
Yeah, it's amazing, and congratulations and well done, because that £60,000 is no short, kind of fundraising effort. It's
it kind of spiraled, to be honest. I was not expecting to raise 60 grand. And I remember, because when you do an online auction, it was a really good platform actually. It was really easy to do, but you could bid up until midnight on like the last day. And I was monitoring it. I got really obsessed with it because it was growing so much. And then, the Guardian covered it and it got a lot of profile from that. And then so the last 5 minutes, like it jumped up by maybe like 15 grand or something, like in literally the last 5 minutes, because everybody like swooped in with these final bids. And then it cut off at midnight, but it was kind of exciting. I remember I was like, oh, what's it going to get to? But I was really surprised by how well it went, but it's all for a good cause. So it was great.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned about, sort of literary festivals. There's something that I've only been to as a result of doing interviews for Pam Macmillan at the Harrogate Crime Writers Festival. We're looking to go to the London Book Fair to do interviews in March, but I found them to be really good. And for authors to get involved, I think is a really big step and something that's very productive for them. Although a lot of indie authors might not kind of want to step into that world, but it's really worth doing. What's your experience been like at these literary festivals?
So I go in sort of dual capacities. So some I go to as a writer and some I go as a publisher. I mean, I like them. It depends what sort of person you are, I suppose. Not everybody likes to be in a big crowded space. But I do think they can be, I've met some brilliant authors at those festivals. So yeah, I think they're good. I mean, for authors, I think sometimes authors think they need to go to the Frankfurt Book Fair or the London Book Fair, but they don't. If you have a specific event or something, then yes, you can, but they're mainly like trade fairs. So for authors, it's more beneficial to go to literary festivals or events, bookshops, libraries. I really love library events. I love to try and support libraries. And if you can use them in the right way and make connections, and sometimes it's just nice to go and hear a great author speak. I mean, I still get very starstruck by sort of like really famous authors or authors that I've like particularly loved. So sometimes I just go to hear them speak. And as I said, sometimes I go as a publisher. At Stratford, I did a mix. I did a workshop on about how to find your hook in commercial fiction. And then I also did one-to-ones with some writers, like 10 minutes of time, where they pitch their ideas to me and I just give them some advice. And then the last thing I did was a panel discussion about book jackets, about what makes a good book jacket, with a designer. It was chaired by another writer. And that was nice because it was a bit different, and we had like show and tell behind us on the screen, so we could give examples of book jackets that have worked and book jackets that haven't worked, and also the journey of how you get a book jacket, which I think people did actually find interesting because it's a bit different from just like, here's how you write a book. So you can pick and choose the events that feel most relevant to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we really do, as much as they say you shouldn't judge a book by the cover, but we really do that.
Yes, and it's extremely important from a publishing perspective. Like it's very, very essential to get that right.
Is that something that you have to deal with a lot in terms of what the suggestions are for a book, and do you have much sort of say on how it should look in your role?
Yeah, I do have quite a lot of say. So I for my authors that are just my personal list, I brief the jacket. So I fill out the form and I say, this is what I would think it should look like. Here are the other authors it could sit alongside in the market. Here's some ideas for what the design could be. And then the designers go away and work on that and usually come up with a range of visuals. And then, I give feedback and we look at them as a team with sales and marketing, etc. And then we show it to the author once we're happy with it. Sometimes they don't like it and we have to go back to the drawing board, which is fine. And because I oversee the list, I sit in on the meeting and I look at all my colleagues' jackets coming through and say, whether I think they're working or not. But it's very, very important because it's how we, as the sales team, use the jackets as a tool to get good support from the retailers. So, it's very important that we get it right. It's also important that the author likes the jacket, but sometimes authors we try to ask them to just listen to us a little bit on like the market because they don't always know that. It's not their job to know that. Maybe different for indie authors because they probably spend more time researching the market. But for traditional authors, it's kind of not really their job.
Has there ever been a situation where you've got a cover that you absolutely love, but the author just doesn't want it?
Yeah. I mean, maybe not that I like love, but there's definitely been jackets that I like. In fact, this week I had two very opposing. I sent out 2 jackets yesterday. One I got like the nicest response I've ever had, probably one of the nicest ones in my career, being like, I think it looks absolutely beautiful, like so happy with it. And the other one was like, I hate it, like dreadful. And I was like, so like one of them like balanced the other out a little bit for me, but it is really, with the one they didn't like, I said, okay, that's fine, we'll sort it out, get something that you like because it's your book, it's your name on it. The one that they loved, I was like, great, that's fantastic.
Yeah, perfect. All right, I'm going to play a very quick video, which will be the introduction to the road to writing, because we want to find out how you got to where you are now. And that includes your professional career in the industry and your author journey. So I'm going to play this little video and we'll rewind the tape a bit and get stuck into that.
Really?
So Phoebe, take us back then. At what point in your life did you think writing is something I want to do?
Well, I would say I always liked the idea of writing. I was always very interested in books and reading. I grew up without television. My mum was quite anti-television, so I became a huge reader partly because of that. She was also a teacher, so she taught me to read really early. I was very lucky. And I always liked writing stories at school. I used to like make little books out of paper and show them to my grandma, but nobody else read them, obviously. And then in all honesty, I didn't really know that writing as a career was an option. So I thought, what can I do as my job? And I ended up training as a journalist because it was either that I thought or be a teacher, and my mum said not to be a teacher, so I did not pursue that, which I'm pleased about now. But no, just teachers are amazing. I just wouldn't have been good enough at it. So I became a trained journalist, started work as a journalist, and then I didn't really like it, and I wasn't very good at it. I was always trying to write like too much, like my articles were too flowery, and I remember my news editor would be like, okay, but like what? Tell us like what, when, where, why, and all those things. And I was just like, oh, I wanted to be more creative. And so I eventually started to apply for publishing jobs, and that was really hard. I got a job as a publishing assistant at Octopus Books, which is part of Hachette UK, which is one of the big 5 publishers in the UK. And I started working on nonfiction, just administrative stuff and very kind of basic editorial stuff. And I was there for a few years, but it was very difficult to actually get into the industry. Like, I got a lot of rejections. I applied for like every publishing job under the sun at entry level, which I do recommend, because I think it's good to not pigeonhole yourself too early, because it is quite competitive to get in and you don't want to limit that. And also your skills can be quite transferable. So that was my first job in the publishing industry. And then when I was in journalism, I also started to think about writing. And actually, one time I was at a party in London, and I was talking to some boy, and he was like, "Oh, what do you want to do?" And probably I was trying to impress him, and I was like, "Oh, I would like to be a writer." And he said, "Well, why don't you write a book then? Why haven't you done it?" And I was like, "Oh," and I was like, "It was." I mean, I literally can't actually remember his name. He did not become a significant figure in my life, but he actually kind of changed my life, because I was like, well, why haven't I done it? Like, it was such a good point. I felt so stupid when he said it. So then I went away and I wrote the first draft of what became The Dollhouse, which was my debut novel. And it was not a great first draft, I would say, but it did exist. And at the time, I was not only working as a journalist every day, but I was working as a babysitter and a barmaid and a tutor in London, because London's so expensive to live in and I had zero money. I don't come from a very moneyed background particularly. So I was just writing like all random times and trying to make it work. And then I sort of rather naively sent it out to like a huge batch of literary agents. I really hope most of them don't remember me, because now I know them and it's really embarrassing. But I didn't know anything about the industry in the way that I do now. And so I was very lucky. I got signed by my agent, Camilla. So I've been with her for about 10 years now. I saw her last week, and she then managed to sell the first book and then the subsequent 4. So that kind of just carried on then once we got the deal. And then I started working in the publishing industry, as I said. So then ever since then, I have basically just done both. So it was a kind of varied route in, and having started in nonfiction, I then moved into fiction in a role at HarperCollins, and have since worked in commercial fiction. And that was really where my passion lies, in both the publishing side and the writing side.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And it seems like a very busy, your transition all the way through is lots of jobs, lots of, multitasking. And I think that's played well into what you're doing now, and still working on the publishing side of it and your writing side. Did you have any idea then, when you made that first not great draft, as you kind of mentioned, that your books would go into the successes and award-winning sort of books that they have been?
No, I don't know. I don't think I ever thought the books would really. I just didn't really know. I just wanted. All I could see was getting it finished. So in the first draft, it wasn't really a thriller. It was called The Architect's Daughters, and it was a sort of like family-led book clubby type novel about a father and his 2 daughters, and what happens after he dies. And then my agent read it, and we met for a coffee, and she sort of gave me some feedback, and she said, I really like XYZ, but like there's quite a lot. It did become kind of quite crimey, and what about making it into more of a thriller? And I had never really thought of that or considered it. But I went away, and she didn't actually sign me then. She just gave me this feedback and said, if you work on it, I would love to reread it. So went away for a few months. I wrote it, I redrafted it, and then I sent it back to her. And then I'll never forget. So then she called me, and I was in Foyles on Charing Cross Road, which was very kind of fortunate. And I was in Foyles with my friend, having coffee in the cafe. And she called me, or she emailed me. Actually, I think maybe she emailed me. So I obviously have forgotten elements, but I definitely and I think she emailed me, and she said, I read your new draft. I loved it. I would absolutely love to sign you. And I was so excited, but I hadn't told anyone. So I saw the email pop up on my phone. I did not tell my friend. I went to the toilets in Foyles, and I was like, so excited, like in Love Actually, where she's making out with that guy. And then she goes across into the stairway, and she's like, just has an excited moment on her own. It was a bit like that. And then I so then I signed with Cam, and she continued to do editorial work on it. And then sent it out and then did sell it. It did not sell super quickly. It sold after quite a long time. We had like a second round of editors that we sent it to. And oh my God, it was so gutting. Like the first round, it didn't sell. I remember for some reason, she sent me all the rejections on Christmas Eve one year.
Wow.
And I had asked to see them. So I did ask to see them. And so I got this 2-pager of like really nice rejections. But they were rejections. And I remember reading it on the way back to Suffolk for Christmas and just crying and being like, I'm never going to sell it. So no, I did not expect them to sell. But once they did, I have been on a trajectory. But it's always up and down. And at the moment, I'm writing book 6, and I don't know whether even that one's not in the contract yet, because my contract finished with the last one, and I had the job and I had lots of stuff going on, so I took a bit longer to write this book. But obviously, I hope it will sell. But there's no guarantees. So I think it's good. You just have to keep perspective, and you have to keep going. And everybody as a writer has lots of ups and downs, I would say. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, I did a video this week on TikTok about not procrastination. What's the word? Imposter syndrome. So yeah, and it happens for everybody, whether you're starting out or whether it's your 50th book in an amazing career. It still happens, and we've had people tell us that on the show. So it's nothing unnatural. We're always expecting, or maybe seeing the worst of what could happen, because nothing's guaranteed in this industry. So it's all about belief and pushing it forward. I'm interested to think. Do you think you're like kind of publisher brain, does it interfere with how you write now? Because you know what to expect and know what makes a good book. Does that change or put pressure on how you write?
In all honesty, no, I don't think so. I think when I write, I get very in the flow of it, and so I sort of ignore everything else. I tend to write. I can write a lot in one sitting. So if I sit down for 5 hours, I can write a lot. I don't really write in short bursts, just because of the way my brain works, I guess. I prefer to have one whole Saturday and just focus on it. And then I wouldn't say that I really think about the market that much. I think, Camilla, my agent, she thinks about the market. So when we had lunch last week, it was to talk about book 6. And she said, it needs to appeal to this readership and that. And I was like, oh, yeah, I guess so. But I hadn't really thought about it because you just get very in the zone. What I would say is I think the writing side makes me a better publisher. I think it works the other way around, because I think it does give me another layer of empathy when it comes to understanding how my authors that I publish feel. And I'm sure I don't always get it right, but I do try and communicate with them in the way that I would like to be communicated with. And I know what it's like to be sat on the other side of it, waiting for an edit or waiting for a cover or wondering why you haven't heard back. So I try my hardest not to leave them in the dark, and to, give them edits that make sense. But I also always say, you don't have to do these edits. I'm not going to hold a gun to your head and make you do these edits. It's a collaboration. This is what I think. What do you think? How can we work on this together to get it into the best state it can be? And so I hope that it makes me a better publisher in that way.
What's your advice then for someone, maybe a debut author that's starting to work with an editor? What advice have you got for them to have a good sort of long-lasting relationship with that editor?
I think it's important that you do listen to your editor. I mean, obviously I would say that, but it really is meant to be a partnership. And I think that we want authors who will work with us and meet us halfway. And if an author is really difficult, it will, it becomes difficult for us as well. If everything is a battle, and this does happen, sadly, everything is a battle and we're always wrong, it's exhausting, with any industry, any job. And this doesn't happen all the time. It's rare. But, we obviously want people who are kind of collaborative, and they can be team players. People that are, able to meet deadlines is great. And people that you obviously build a trusting, honest relationship. So I don't need my authors to put me on a pedestal, and I won't put them on a pedestal. I think it's better to just be we're all adults. Let's talk about this thing. If your book hasn't sold, let's talk about why. What can we do? These are the factors that might have influenced it. If it's an editorial point, let's explain why I think this, and you say why you think that, and maybe there's a third solution. I always think for editors, part of your job is not to fix the problem per se, but identify the problem and then help the writer develop the answer, because I really do want it to be the author's book. And it is so frustrating if you have an editor say oh, why don't you just change this and do X, Y, Z for no, and you're well, why? It's the same, why can't we use my idea? And so I want people to have that kind of authorial control. So I don't think I've answered the question really. I guess we just want someone that's collaborative, that is responsive, that is happy to meet us halfway, and that that realizes that we're in a partnership. And of course, we're paying the author, so there is that power dynamic. But really, the long-term careers of writers and editors, I think, are based on real partnerships.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Thank you. I think it makes a lot of sense, to have that sort of open and transparent relationship and communication, because that's the best way it's going to work, right? So from your point of view, do you see any sort of common mistakes in, say, an opening chapter or manuscript that might put you off like a good, promising sort of story?
I think if the story is promising enough, then we can change the first chapter. I do think a lot of writers fall into the trap of sort of feeling they have to set up the story before going into the story. So I don't mean you have to open with some sort of car chase or something dramatic, but you can open with something that has impact. And I think it's very important to consider your first line and your first page, because we do get a lot of submissions and you want yours to stand out. I always reference Liz Nugent. She's the Irish crime writer of Lying in Wait and Strange Sally Diamond and Unraveling Oliver and some others. And I just think every single book of hers, the first line is incredible. I should actually memorize them, because I always refer to them, but I actually can't think of them off my head, but they are really, really good. So have a look at that if you want an example of a good first line. And I think it's important to realize that, you don't have to start. You wouldn't believe how many submissions we get, which is like the writer or the protagonist is stuck in a traffic jam and it's raining and it's like, oh my God, who cares? So can you just get to something whether it's a great character observation or a great line of dialogue or something. You don't really have to set up the story and then do the story. You should be able to do those simultaneously. I think that's the biggest mistake I see in early first drafts.
I think a lot of people are maybe afraid to start with dialogue as the opener because of what you're saying,
Yeah, I think, and dialogue is really hard. I wouldn't say I was a super expert at dialogue, but I think it's just trying to grab the reader in straight away and not feeling like, readers are smart. You haven't got to set everything up and then, it's no good saying, oh, but just get to chapter 3 and then it all gets really good, because it's unfortunately, we as agents and editors, we will not get to chapter 3 if your first chapter is not strong enough. So, really, if you're going to pick, obviously the whole book should be good, but if you're going to put your energy anywhere, really try and hone the beginning. If you have a really strong concept in the beginning, doesn't work, but, for some reason I carried on reading, we can make changes. Your book hasn't got to be perfect when it comes to us, because otherwise, I wouldn't have a radio job. So hopefully it's not perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got a bit of a quote here that I thought was really interesting. So I'm going to try and pull a question out of it. The CEO is Simon Schuster. I can never say that properly. Schuster?
Yeah. I can't really say either, if I'm honest. So I need to learn.
It said that you are sharp, creative, and commercially astute, with a brilliant eye for talent and a real passion for publishing books that connect at scale, which is an amazing thing to be said about you. Yeah. But what I see there is a brilliant eye for talent. So this might help the people trying to get to work with people like yourself. So what jumps out as you as talent in an author? What is your draw to them?
Yeah, I think some of it is subjective, some of it is the voice, and it's always important to remember that when you're trying to get published, you do only need one person to say yes. So I might love your voice, but another editor at Penguin might not love your voice, and that's okay. You haven't got to be the talk of the town or in a huge bidding war. Obviously nice if you are, but realistically not many people are. So keep that in mind. Yeah, for me, I think it's is there a strong enough concept here that I can turn into a book? So a manuscript is not a book. So it's is there something here, idea-wise or concept-wise, that I can see a clear cover, title, routes to market, sales pitch for, in commercial fiction I'm speaking about. And then in terms of the writer's style, do I feel in safe hands? Do I feel as though they are in control of what they're writing? Or does it feel a little bit all over the place, or if they haven't quite found their voice yet? What I don't want when I'm reading is to feel anxious that there's going to be some sort of mad twist that doesn't make sense, or too many characters thrown in there. Those are some of the common mistakes I see. So it is important for you as a writer to try and be true to your voice. And And also practice. Like, you're not going to necessarily be like a brilliant writer on the first draft. As I say, my first book, I hate that book. Like, I don't really read it. I did a book club thing the other day and people asked me about it. In all honesty, I'd forgotten the plot. I was like, don't know why I wrote that bit. I was like 25 years old when I wrote it, 24. So like, I mean, I shouldn't say that. I'm grateful for the book, I think, what it gave me, but it's not my favorite. I think I became a better writer as I carried on. And the book I'm writing now, book 6, I hope if I get to the finish line, I will be proud of it, because I've tried to be a mature, I'm writing it 10 years later, so hopefully I'm more mature, and that's okay. And for you as a writer, you can practice. When I was in America, I studied in America, and I did a creative writing module at the University of Illinois, and that was amazing because I got proper feedback from the students and the teacher. I was also a student, but from the rest of the class, my peers, and that was really helpful just to know, because at that point I was like, can I even write? And it was fairly positive, so I was like, okay, I can. But also some of it was constructive, so be open to feedback, join a writers group. You have to be able to share your work with others. If you cannot keep it all to yourself forever, because if you never show anyone, well, A, you won't ever get published, and B, you won't get a sense of how to grow and develop. So I think it's being aware. When I'm looking at talent, I'm looking at, does this person have the voice? Do they have the tenacity? Do they have what it takes? I don't massively want to buy loads of sort of one-off books. I would prefer to build authors book on book over their career. And you haven't got to have won any awards, or you don't have to do expensive courses, but I do think you have to take it seriously if it's what you want to do.
Yeah, that's something that's very apparent through the interviews we've had as well. It's the authors that treat things like the writing as like a career are the ones that kind of make it more successful. I know I'm going to ask this question because I know someone probably would have thought that when you said it. You mentioned about not having too many characters is kind of a bit of a flag. What would that consist of? How many characters roughly do you think that is?
So there are exceptions. There are authors that can pull this off, obviously, but in general, I think you don't really need more than a handful. Like realistically, I would say more than 5. I think if you're using different points of view, which I do a lot in my books, some of them I think I have 3 or even 4 points of view, but a lot of the time my editor would tell me you need to differentiate these voices more because they all sound a bit the same. They all sound like you. And I find it very hard writing male voices, so I challenge myself on that sometimes with certain books. Sometimes I avoid it. In book 6 I was like, I'm just not going to bother trying male voices time. So be aware of the points of view and peripheral characters. Like, of course you can have like reference minor characters, but in terms of characters that feel real and 3-dimensional, say you're writing a book which is like 350 pages when it's printed out as a book, you don't have the space to develop 20 characters in that book, and it's better to have a smaller cast where the characters feel 3D and have the breathing room on the page than it is to have a large cast. So I would really say it's basically a handful.
Yeah,
and you can just have one. Lots of books are just one main character. Fine.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to play part 2, which is what's the story, and then when we come back from that, hopefully you remember the trip.
Okay, that was more recent.
Yeah, give us a sort of pitch for that, and then I'll ask a few questions around that. So part 2, what's the story, coming right up. So Phoebe, the trip, what's that all about? Can you let us know?
So The Trip is my 5th book, my most recent one. It is set in Thailand, between Bangkok and Koh Samet, which is a small island off the coast of Bangkok. And it's about 2 couples who go on holiday together. It's supposed to be the trip of a lifetime. While they're on holiday, a stranger from one of their pasts appears one night in a hostel where they're staying in Bangkok. And for one of those characters, this person's reappearance is going to kind of ruin everything that they have set up in the life that they have now. So I can't spoil the ending, but it's a thriller, and it explores themes of class, friendship, and also domestic abuse. So it is essentially, I hadn't written a book before about couples. My one before that was about 4 friends, female friends, and I had written a lot about family in the first couple. But this one, I wanted the idea of two different couples. One couple is a lot more wealthy than the other one, so there's sort of dynamics around like what they can and can't afford to do when they go out to Thailand, and like who's paying for everything, and that creates tension as well. And then there's sort of tensions within, you know, like I was a bit like White Lotusy, you know, like if there's tension within each couple and then there's tension within all four, it creates more dynamics for me as a writer to play with. And it was really fun writing about Thailand. Like it was great to set it somewhere abroad. At the time of writing, I had not been to Thailand, but then last year I went to Thailand after I had written the book, because I wanted to check that it was how I had described it. Luckily it was. And you know, mainly but I had done a lot of research, and these days you can, you know, I literally watched a video that someone had taken of them getting off the plane in Bangkok, and like they filmed themselves all the way from the plane right to the outside. So I was able to describe the airport. I read a guidebook about Thailand. I read lots of traveler blogs. You know, I looked up the hostels online. So it's amazing. Obviously, the internet is an amazing resource. So a quote of the year there. Yeah, I was able to do a lot of research, but it was great to go and see it for myself.
Yeah, I love it. That's kind of a backwards way of doing it, but I love that. Yeah, because people would love to use, you know, an excuse to go on a holiday for research. Yeah, I did the same for my second novel. I based it weirdly in Quebec in Canada for no reason. But yeah, I kind of use Google images and all that for the street view, and just really use that for description side of things. So it is a real good tip for people who are thinking, I want to set something somewhere without, you know, going on the holiday. Well, that's kind of a nice thing to do as well. Yeah, we just talked about characters. So you've got 4 characters in this, all, you know, mixed up in secrets and betrayals and all of those good things. So was there any character out of those 4 that were really tricky to sort of get hold of and find their voice?
Yeah, I would say so. So the couples are, so Theo and Saskia are the wealthy couple, and Saskia, it probably is obvious when you start reading it. So Saskia is hiding something, and it was hard to kind of feed that in at the right moment, and which is always the case with psychological thrillers. You know, you have to think, okay, at what point am I going to reveal things to the reader? And is she a reliable narrator? Who knows? And she is someone who has kind of formed herself a new identity. So she's now married to Theo. She's come into a lot of money. She is, you know, wearing a flashy engagement ring that the other woman is sort of a bit like over. And so it's sort of about like, how do we shake off the version of ourselves from 20 years ago, and who do we become, and how far can we escape from the version that we were? That was the sort of journey that Saskia goes on. I became fond of Saskia. And I liked writing Lucas. So Lucas does have, actually, he does have a perspective as the male in this, yeah, but not in the 6th one. But and so he's just meant to be, you know, he's a teacher. He's not earning very much money. He's very worried about money. So when they go to Thailand, he feels like he can't keep up with Theo. And so that was interesting for me to explore that idea of, I guess, masculinity and power and money, and how hard it can be to keep up with your friends. The protagonists in the book are all in their early 30s. And, you know, that's the stage where some people have bigger jobs than others. Some people have higher salaries. Some people have children or different responsibilities. And, you know, the tensions can start to arise because some people you can't keep up, or you compare yourselves. And I thought that was sort of interesting to explore. So that was partly the inspiration for those characters. And again, I think it's, you know, I hope there's something there to appeal to lots of different readers who can see, like, you know, elements of themselves in the characters. I don't always write likable characters. That's why I love Liz Nugent, because a lot of her characters are just awful. Like, they're so awful to each other, but they're so interesting psychologically. Yeah, for, you know, as well, a lot of crime writers write dislikable characters, but for me, when I'm speaking, and I say this to authors as well, you know, your characters haven't got to be likable, but you have to understand them. So you don't have to love them, but I think you have to empathize with them. And I struggle a bit with novels where, you know, someone is just a psychopath for no real reason, or, you know, they and there's not really a reason behind it. So I think that can be an issue in crime novels as well. You have to take the time to think, okay, why is the person that's doing something wrong? Why are they doing it? Like, what is their background? Of course, some people are born, you know, wanting to do bad things. But I think that if you unpack it, you know, there's usually something where you can explore a bit of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And interestingly, you know, going to the locations, your thriller has been set in the UK, Botswana, and of course Thailand. So why do you decide that you want to change sort of locations for each of your stories?
Oh, well, in the first three, I just wrote what I knew. So the first one is set in London. The second one is set in Essex, where I used to live. The third one is set in Suffolk, where I grew up, and a bit in France. My ex-boyfriend had, his uncle had like a beautiful house in France, and I started writing it while we were on holiday there. And so I basically just described the house. And then the fourth one, The Wild Girls, I wrote in the COVID pandemic. So to be honest, that was just a response to feeling so desperately trapped. And that is the easiest book I've ever written, The Wild Girls. It just kind of was so easy to write. And the edits were really easy. It was the best experience. Could not say the same for all of them. And then after I'd done that, with the trip, I wanted to explore somewhere further afield as well. Book 6, I have come back to London and I'm writing about areas that I have lived in. So I've sort of gone like, write what you know, then do something else, then come back to what you know. So I guess it depends where you are in your life as well.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting, isn't it? And I think going from experience and writing off your own experience can be really powerful because all the feelings that come with it. So I think that's a bit of good advice for someone who's thinking about locations there.
Yeah, I think it can help. And I'm not that much of a stickler. I know some people, they write Amazon reviews and they say, well, that street does not connect with that street. And I'm like, I don't really care about that. Like, as long as it reads properly and it, it feels grounded in reality. It's difficult with London because publishing does have this elitist London problem. And I try not to set everything in London. But then if you live in London, you do kind of want to write about where you know, in a way, because you feel so connected to it. But it's important that we, that as publishers, we publish a range of voices from all different backgrounds. And I love things that are outside London as well.
Yeah. You do a lot of stuff on your Substack, which is The Honest Editor. And that's really cool. A Substack is something we've been pushing, not for anything else, other reason than I think it's great for authors to kind of build that following and showcase what you do. And obviously that's what you're doing in terms of the editing side of things as well. But you've also mentioned that you're going to release or pre-order your books on Substack, book 6. Is that right?
Have I? What do you mean?
I thought it was. I read something that it was about you gonna release pre-orders on Substack. Maybe I've got that wrong.
I don't think that's me. No, I would like to do that. I don't know how to do that. I was saying to someone earlier, like
I was gonna ask you about it, but there you go.
I'm not very. I literally don't know how to do that. I mean, I think I suppose I could. I think I know how to link, so I could be like, yeah, you can pre-order it, but it's not up for pre-order yet because it isn't under contract. So I don't think that might be somebody else, but. Yeah, I like Substack as a tool. I started my my Substack a few months ago, and it's aimed at demystifying the publishing industry. So if I do sell book 6, I'm sure I will try to get pre-orders through it. And I think newsletters in general can be really effective for authors. So maybe that's what you read. There's a couple of authors that I refer to who have brilliant newsletters that what it does is it builds like a kind of like dedicated readership rather than sometimes like Twitter or Instagram where it's like a bit wider, a bit far-flung, whereas Substack, I think, and most newsletter platforms, you're going direct into people's inboxes, and there's statistics showing that they are very effective as a marketing tool. So I would like to know more about Substack. In all honesty, I use it in a very basic way. So if you find out how to do all this, then please let me know.
For us, we mentioned Twitter earlier. We built a following up on Twitter for years when we started the show. And obviously that kind of social side of it is backed off a lot. So for us, having lost a lot of fans off there, followers of the show, Substack comes with its own emailing list. So that's the benefit we've seen when it comes to authors using or updating their work on there, or maybe just being socially active. I think that's a really good benefit. So you have that email list there if that ever shuts down,
Yeah, I agree. And it's a shame because I used to love Twitter. Like I used to really connect with lots of people. I had a fairly big following after a few years. And not huge, but like, I felt like it was a decent following that I had built. And then I still have it. Like I do use it sometimes. I cross promote Substack stuff onto there, but I often, now if I check my notifications now, it'll just be like loads of spam. I'm sure you get the same, like a chunk. And so it's not, people obviously aren't really using it. And I do have a Blue Sky account, but I don't really use it. And I feel like people thought it was going to take off, and I don't really think it has, maybe in the same way. Like, so Substack, I think, though, is great. And I like the longer form style of it, for sure.
Yeah. Do you think then, from your perspective, do authors need an author brand or an author presence on, say, social platforms?
I don't think they need one. I would say that if you can do it well and you enjoy doing it, then I would advise that you do it, because it allows you to connect with readers. And I think these days readers really like to see behind the scenes and hear who their authors are. And there are some people doing it very well and successfully. I think in nonfiction, so the nonfiction team in everywhere I've worked, they will often buy books based on people's platforms. So, someone will have a huge TikTok or Instagram, and that will help them get a good book deal. It doesn't really work so much that way in fiction. It can do sometimes, but I always say it's really about whether you think you can enjoy it. Like, if you hate it and you're bad at it, don't do it. Like, some people use it and it's not, it doesn't look great. Like, it's better just not to do it. But if you can find the platform that works for you, like, it doesn't have to be you're on every single platform, but if you find a platform, like, I don't really use TikTok, for example, but I do use Substack and I do use Instagram a lot. So those are the ones that I prefer. But find the one that works for you and then explore it and see how you get on.
Yep. Awesome. Okay, we're going to go on to part 3 of the show, which is community questions. So I'm going to ask a few staple questions, and then we'll try and find out a bit more about where people can find you and all your books. But community questions coming up. So, Phoebe, this is where the questions get a little bit weird, in the best kind of way. Okay, if you could take any character from the world of fiction and, say, drop it into The Trip or one of your novels, what character would you take and why?
Oh, gosh, that's hard. Very hard. I'll tell you a character I love. So I used to publish Callie Taylor, C.L. Taylor, she writes under, and she knows this, but she has a character called Ursula in her book Strangers. And I mentioned it in a Substack the other day, actually. And I just think she was such a brilliant character. She was really well drawn. I think she's a kleptomaniac. I just loved her. I thought she was a great character. And so I would love to drop her in as I think she would make a cameo somewhere. Like in The Trip, they go to all these kind of hot spots of Thailand that people would recognize, like tourist spots. And it would be fun if she was I don't know, behind the counter somewhere, or she walked past or something like that. I would love a cameo of characters that I have loved in fiction that I think are very well drawn. So maybe Ursula.
Yeah, cool. Okay, if you could take the ending of something, whether this is a TV show, a novel, or a movie, and change the ending to something, what ending would you change and why?
Oh, that's a good question too. So TV shows, one of my favorite shows ever is The Affair. It was on HBO, I think. And it had Dominic West and Ruth Wilson. And what I liked about it, it was almost like a novel. So it's about an affair, but you see it from both the male and the female perspective of the people having the affair. So part 1 is the scene, and then part 2 is the same scene, but from Ruth Wilson's perspective. So it's all about how perspective works. We could both come away from this call with different perspectives of how it went, and I'm very interested in that. And it went for 5 seasons. I stuck with it. Seasons 1 and 2 were amazing. Seasons 3 and 4 were bonkers. They were so mad. They were not good. Season 5, I stayed with it. They pulled it back. It actually was a good ending, but there was a key character who was killed off, which I think it must have been to do with the contract, but I was very upset about it because it was such a good series, and I would definitely have changed that. The character did not need to die. It made no sense with what had happened before. But again, it's difficult with TV and film, isn't it? Because sometimes there's things where, it's the actor's contractual financial reasons and it can ruin the story. But I do still recommend it. And if you're interested in writing, I do think it's a good show to watch because it's all about perspective and on the nuance of when people have affairs. It's not always that they're both bad people. It's just that there are different things going on, I think. So yeah, worth a watch.
Yeah, interesting. It's really frustrating, isn't it, when you've got a big series 5 seasons and it just starts going off the boil and it's come on.
Yeah. Well, it was what was that show that what's his name was in, House of Cards, where he suddenly was written out. So obviously that was a bit unfortunate, but well, understatement. But yeah, it was it's tricky when you've liked a show for a long time and then it sort of has a bit of a flat ending. And same with novel. I can't think of a novel with a terrible ending right now, but I'm sure that they do exist.
Yes, I'm pretty sure they do. I'm interested then, if your books, say, were optioned, or I don't know, The Trip, have you got any sort of celebrities that you would love to be cast as one of your characters?
I'm really bad at celebrities, I will just say, mainly because I grew up without the TV. So I have these
Oh yeah.
huge gaps. All my friends laugh at me because I have these huge cultural gaps of like, don't know who anyone is. I will say, so one of them was optioned. I think it was The Babysitter, the third one. I do think that would make the best film. The Wild Girls, I was also speaking to TV people about, but it's gone a bit cold, as always kind of happens. None of them have been made yet. I would say I love Felicity Jones in The Theory of Everything. I think she's just a beautiful actress and a really brilliant actress. I do also love Dominic West. So yeah, I suppose those are the two I would say I can think of. Although I don't think they could be a couple because there's kind of a big age gap. Maybe I'm not sure now. Not sure. Maybe not.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to sort of a bit about your industry now, and then I'll wrap it up with one little other random question. What current trends in commercial fiction are you most excited about, and what trends do you think are on the way?
So at the moment in publishing, science fiction and fantasy is enormous. So science fiction and fantasy for our Q4, like the fourth quarter of the year, has overtaken general fiction as the second biggest category underneath crime and thriller. So it's crime and thriller, then SFF, then general fiction, which is sort of book club, women's fic. That's the first time that's happened in quite a,
Wow.
it's really kind of quite significant. It's up 20% year on year. It's across the market, which is enormous. So although SFF isn't like my go-to, I'm really interested by the boom in it and how well readers, particularly younger readers, are responding to it. And I think it's just very interesting to watch that play out. And it doesn't show any signs of slowing down. After Frankfurt Book Fair, it was still very buoyant. It's also nice to see romance having more of a moment. I again am not like the biggest romance reader in the world, but like I think it's great. I used to read a lot more romance when I was younger, and I have a lot of time for it. And I think that it can be easily dismissed as a sort of like, oh, that's kind of fluffy, easy to write. And actually, it's not. Like I think it's really hard to write. And that's the same. I could say that about all commercial fiction. People think it's easy, and it drives me insane. So I'm like, well, you try it then. It's not easy. Commercial does not mean badly written. It's more plot focused and it sells in different retailers. That's pretty much the definition, I suppose. So those two are booming. Crime and thriller, obviously I write crime and I adore crime. It's not having the most buoyant time it's ever had. Like compared to when I joined the industry, it is kind of a bit flatter and it's very saturated, but it is still, it's still an enormous category and it still sells. So there's often, it's often finding those subgenres within crime and thriller, which can be exciting. I wish I had a crystal ball and I could see exactly what everyone was going to want. But I also believe in writers for long term. Some writers, they might change genres or they might write in a genre that's not very popular. I mean, we published Colleen Hoover at SNS, and everyone knows like she had this huge backlist that nobody was buying, and then is now like one of the biggest authors in the world. So I like that about self-publishing and about TikTok, that it has sort of brought some backlist authors to life and changed the trajectories of people's careers so hugely. That's quite exciting. And I also think it's worth saying in this question, I know a lot of writers who didn't have success on their first book but have changed names, written under pseudonym, and then had like life-changing novels that you wouldn't even know as a reader because you don't know that they've changed names. So people that you think are sort of a one-hit or overnight success or anything like that, like most of the time they're not. So it's important to put the graft in and to keep the faith.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And yeah, the fact that SFF was SFF. Yeah, sorry, I thought I was going mad then. The fact that's gone up in such a huge percentage is really interesting to know. And it's things like that. Is that something that authors can like find out and discover? In fact, the question should be: is it worth writing to trends that are on the app, or is it just do what you need to do?
I think it's important that you write what you do love, because you do have to promote it and publicize it for like 2 years when you're in it, and then obviously forever. So I wouldn't encourage people to write something they really weren't interested in. That said, if there is something that's on trend and you think, oh, I'd quite like to give it a go, nothing wrong with that. I understand people want to make money. I understand they want to write books that readers pick up. So if you've always had an inkling to write romantasy, like go for it. Why not?
Absolutely.
To your first point about how you find out, so we get a lot of data through Nielsen, which is the company that tracks book sales. You might hear it referred to as the TCM or the total consumer market. So we can look up book sales, and they also give us presentations about what trends are coming in and out and which category. Every book is categorized behind the scenes, and then we can see which categories are up or which categories are down. You have to pay for that, so like the publishers pay for it. So that information is not necessarily publicly available to authors, but there are often think pieces written. We often get asked by the media to, I often get called and said, can you comment on this trend, and then there'll be a quote from me in the newspaper or whatever. So if you do a bit of research, you can find out for sure.
Yeah.
And also you can just look what's selling on Amazon. Look what's in the top 100. Look in your local bookshop which books are being stocked in high quantity. You can find out in that way.
Yeah, some good tips there. Okay, we're running out of time, so I'll ask one more question and then we'll find out a bit more about where people can find you. What's your favorite day to unwind after a long day of writing?
My favorite way to unwind?
Yes.
Well, what is it? I do kickboxing, which I enjoy. So sometimes I take frustration out on the pads. The other day, my trainer was like, "What are you thinking about?" So I was like, punched super hard, and I was like, thinking about this thing I'd have been annoyed about, and he was like, "Okay, channel that." So that's good for stress relief. I'm also in a local drama group, so I am involved in amateur dramatic plays, which I love because it's just nothing to do with publishing, and it's really good for me to just go somewhere. We just finished our latest show, go and rehearse and then perform, and just do something that's totally different from the publishing industry, because it can be a very all-consuming industry and it becomes your identity. So it's good to have hobbies that are separate to that.
Nice. Yeah, didn't see the kickboxing come in there.
No one ever does. Also, I like going to the pub.
Yes, of course. Okay, this is the morbid question we ask, so bear with it. You're on your deathbed looking back on your career. What would success mean to you?
Oh God, that is morbid. What would success look like to me? You know what? I just really believe in the power of books to change the world. So if one person reads my book and they're in a really bad place mentally and they just need to escape, and my books are not self-help, they're not going to change the world in that way. But for me, books have always been such a resource. So if you're feeling sad, you're feeling down, something terrible has happened, escaping into commercial fiction. This is partly why I love commercial fiction, and it takes you away from what you're going through for a few hours. Like for me, that will be success. And that sounds a bit trite, but it is true, because I think, it's so important that, and it's really sad to see the rates of literacy falling recently, and there's a crisis with children's reading. And I think, if people don't realize they can read these books to help themselves, and it doesn't have to be physical. People who have dyslexia, you can listen to audio, you can read ebooks, whatever you want. It's all reading. So that for me is a success. And also, what I would also say is, for me, being a published writer was something I wanted, and with the Dollhouse, that dream was achieved. So if I never sell another book or nobody ever buys anymore, that deal kind of fulfilled something in me that you can never, no one can take that away from me. For all writers, is true. So if you've had one book out, you should be so proud of yourself. Like most of the books that come across our desks, they don't get published, and it's really sad. But if you have got that far, you need to be proud of yourself, and that's an achievement. So yeah, I think that too.
And I've got to squeeze this one in because I should have asked it. Give us 3 authors that we should look out for from your perspective.
Oh, okay. So I'm publishing the next book by Sarah Vaughan in the springtime. Sarah is the author of Anatomy of a Scandal, which was a huge hit a few years ago. It was also adapted for TV with Sienna Miller. And this is her latest one. It's called Based on a True Story. And it is about a children's writer who hosts a lavish 70th birthday party, only to find that when all her family come home, there is somebody else at the party who is threatening to destroy her whole career. It's amazing. I think Sarah's a genius suspense writer. So look out for that. So that's a plug for my own list. Aside from that, I always love Liz Nugent. As I said, that's a recommendation for me from the crime side. Who else do I love? I also read this really lovely book the other day by Sophia Money-Coutts, who is a friend of mine and a journalist, and it's called The Year of the Dog. And it's about a breakup that she went through, which she's public about, and the fact that in the wake of the breakup, the puppy that they had brought together kind of became hers, and she got through the year and the breakup with the support of the dog. And it's written in a diary format, which I always really love. It's funny, it's very heartfelt, but also, smart and astute about grief and I guess the importance of a pet sometimes. So that's sort of a different recommendation, but I really loved it and thought it was great.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for that. So just to finish off then, where can people find you on social media? Where can they stalk you, and where can they buy your books?
So you can find me on Instagram. I'm on Instagram as Phoebe Ann Morgan, ANN. I am still on X as Phoebe_A_Morgan. I think it's the same on Blue Sky. My Substack is The Honest Editor, which you can find. You can be a free subscriber. You can be a paid subscriber if you want, but you don't have to be. Get pretty much the same access as a free person, which is fine. And then what else am I on social media? Those are probably the main ways. I have Facebook as Phoebe Morgan Author. So I'm on there too. Don't really have TikTok. You can buy the books wherever you would like. They're in bookshops and online. They were in the supermarkets when they were published, but now they drop out as they were published a little while ago. So yeah, you can order them online or your local indie Waterstones. And if you buy one, then thank you, and I hope that you enjoy it.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Phoebe, and again, congratulations on the new role. I'm sure it's going to be an amazing career for you. Yeah, loved you sharing your story with us, and you've put some amazing bits of advice and information in there, so thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed yourself, but we're up for the hour.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here, and thanks everybody for watching and listening.
You're welcome. If you are watching this now or listening back on the podcast, thank you so much. Please give it a thumbs up, leave some comments, and if you have any follow-up questions, you know what email address and our socials, just send them along and we'll be happy to answer them. So from us, it's goodbye. Have a great weekend and look after yourselves. Thank you. Bye.